Okay, hi Year Sevens. I'm going to be showing you how to paint an image that looks like Yellena James. And also, if you don't have paint, on one half of this drawing I'm going to show you how you can use other materials to get a really colourful outcome. So what I've decided to do on this painting is do one half on which I'm going to use paint. So I'm going to use paint on this half. And then on this half, I'm going to show you how you can use colouring pencils and pens if you have colouring pencils and pens at home. So I'm going to show you what equipment I have because then you can kind of see and match what you do. So first of all, you need some pencils. So I have a pack of sketching pencils. I used my 2H pencil that was in this pack in order to make this drawing. But if you only have a HB pencil or just any pencil lying around at home, you can use any pencil you want. The only reason why I use 2H is because if you remember, a 2H pencil gives you a very light line, and we need light lines for this drawing. So if you do have any sort of sketching pencils where you have a H pencil, I would say use that. But if you don't, then just use any pencil that you've got. Just put very light pressure when you're drawing, okay? Don't go in too hard with your pencil. I've told you all this loads and loads of times, so you should be used to it now, putting very light pressure onto your pencil in order to get a light pencil drawing, okay? So first of all, you need some pencils. Now, the equipment is, so I have watercolour paints, which are here, okay? These are just standard, bog standard watercolour paints, but they're in tubes. If you have watercolour paints at home, I think a couple or a few people showed me when I looked at your photos and work, it looked like it was done using watercolour. You might have watercolour in a block format, so in a not in liquid format, okay? So these are watercolours in tubes. If you have them in blocks, then that's absolutely fine. These work in exactly the same way. It's just a liquid format of watercolour. Okay, so I have watercolour pencils. The other paint that I have is this one here. So this is called gouache. It's very similar to acrylic paint. So if you have acrylic paint at home, you can use acrylic paint, but I don't have acrylic paint, I have gouache. And it's kind of a middle ground between watercolour paint and acrylic paint, because you can use this like an acrylic, or you can water it down and use it like a watercolour paint as well. So I have gouache here. So if you have paint like this, or you've got acrylic, then you can use that, okay? So those are the two paints that I have at home. If you have any other paint, so if you've got ready mix paint, if you've got poster paint at home, any paint, just use paint, okay? So it doesn't matter what type of paint you have. I just have these two at home, but you can use whatever type of paint that you have, okay? Then the other thing that I have are watercolour pencils. Now, watercolour pencils, they can be used as normal colouring pencils, or you can add water to it and it makes an effect like watercolour paint does. But the only reason why I'm going to show you the artwork with my watercolour pencils is because I don't have colouring pencils at home. So I'm just going to use these watercolour pencils like colouring pencils, so you can do the same thing, because I don't think many of you will have watercolour pencils. Okay, so I've got some colouring pencils. And then I've got felt tips, okay? So I did have more colours, but I don't know where the rest of my felt tips have gone. But I've just got some felt tips here in different colours. The only differences with my felt tip is that it has a soft tip to it, okay? So I have my pens have a soft tip, whereas usually obviously felt tip pens have a hard tip at the end, but that doesn't matter as long as it's a coloured pen, okay? So just like a felt tip. And everyone, you all need to make sure that you have a pen that has some black ink inside of it, okay? So you can do this with biro, but if you do have a pen that has ink inside of it, that would be better, because when we paint over it or colour over it, the ink in the black will stand out more. Okay, so try and get a pen that has black ink inside of it. If you really don't have that, then just use a biro. Okay, so a black biro you need. All right, and then obviously if you're doing painting, then you need something that you can use as a palette. So I use this thing, which is a old sign that I'm meant to hang up in my kitchen, but I haven't. So I just use this as my palette. Obviously, if you are going to use like a plate or anything like that, just make sure you get your parents' permission before you do it, because obviously I don't want you to just take something out of your kitchen, put loads of paint on it, and then your parents' items get ruined. So just make sure that you ask permission before you take anything. If you don't have anything solid, then I would say use a piece of paper, but please try, it will be better for you to try and get something solid rather than using paper. And then finally, I've just got a cup of water. Again, ask your parents' permission before you start going into the cupboards and start getting cups out and filling them with paint water, and then some paintbrushes. Image I have copied from this photograph here that I've taken from Yellena Jame's website. But as you can see, my picture is kind of a scaled up version, so I've cut out some parts like these bits here going around, so that those parts are absent in my drawing because I've just scaled up my image. Now the thing that I want to tell you before you start doing your drawing is, if you do a drawing that has lots of little bits like this where the she has added like these little yellow kind of teardrops and those really light little bits, what I would do is I wouldn't actually draw all of these things. So if you see under this blue, there are these little yellow teardrops, but under my blue area, so those blue marks there are these here, I've not added those yellow teardrops. Okay, because you can do that freehand, you don't need to draw it beforehand. All right, so start off with the main body and the large parts of the drawing that you can see, and then add all of the little finer details in afterwards when you actually start painting. Okay, so you can see here, obviously mine is a lot larger than this one. It's just because I scaled mine further in when I was drawing it. Okay, so you start off with the drawing. I've obviously done mine in pencil beforehand, and I've made sure that the drawing is as accurate as possible. So I was making sure that I was looking at the image before I was doing my drawing. So you just need to make sure that you're doing that as well. So make sure that you are drawing the image whilst you're looking at the photograph, either on your computer or your phone, or even a printout. Like I said, this part here I'm going to be completing using paint, and this part here I'm going to be completing using felt tips. Okay, so I'm going to start off using paint because paint obviously takes a little bit longer to dry. So I'm going to start off by doing the paint. I am not going to show you how to paint the entire thing because otherwise we are going to be here for hours whilst I paint this, or colour it in on the other half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by showing you how to use paint in order to make these images look like James's work, and likewise with the pen. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish it off camera, and then I'm going to upload the finished piece of work onto Firefly so you can have a look there. All right, so I'm going to start off by painting this big flower over here, and I can see in this flower there is some orange and there's some dark pink and there's some light pink. Now the good thing with watercolor paint is that watercolor paint merges in and it kind of blends the tones together. So if I show you on a separate bit of paper, so this is one of the paintings that I did quite a while ago off Yellena Jame, and it's actually the same drawing as this. So this is just a scrap bit of paper. So if I get some watercolour paint in any colour that I've already opened. So if I get a paintbrush, now watercolour, the idea of watercolour, if you do have it, is that the more water you add to your watercolour paint, the lighter that colour becomes. Okay, so if I add even more paint to my red, so I'm just going back in with adding some more water into my already watered down paint. It becomes lighter and lighter. Now I rinse off my paintbrush and I take a bit of the green. You'll notice that these colours, they merge really nicely together. I use some more water and water down the edge of it. So this is just on my paintbrush at the moment. I've just gone into my cup of water. So this paintbrush just has water on it right now. It's not got any paint on it. You can see that it blends together, okay? So this is what watercolour does. It's made to blend colours together because obviously it's water-based. Watercolour is a water-based paint. Okay, so you can see here that it's got a nice merge from the red going into the green. Okay, so just bear that in mind if you do have watercolour, that you keep that in mind, that watercolour will blend together. So if you don't want two colours to merge, then I would recommend that you wait for one colour to dry and then you go over it with the other colour. Okay, so how watercolour works, well, any paint, which I've told you before, is that you need to be making sure that you're going from light to dark. Okay, you don't go in with your darkest colour first, you never do that. You always make sure you go in with your lightest colour first and then you gradually become dark, because you cannot paint over dark paint. Okay, it doesn't work. So you need to make sure that you are layering and you're starting off with a light colour wash first and then you're adding to it and making areas darker. Okay, but before we even start painting, you have to go over the edges using your black pen. Okay, so I hope that this will work. So I'm going to go over my drawing with my black pen, because if you look at Yellena James's work, her large objects usually have a black outline. We've got the drawing, so like you can see here, I've added the black lines. Now the this flower here, like I said, it's a light pink and then it's got dark pink in some areas and it's got kind of like a reddish orange, so it's got more of a tertiary orange colour, a red orange in just the base of the leaf over here. So the first thing, like I said, you start off with your lightest colour. I'm going to go in with painting pink, okay? If you don't have pink, you can make pink paint by adding red and white. And then if you want, just get a scrap bit of paper and paint onto it to see if that colour is something that you want. So for me, I don't really like that colour, so I'm going to try and mix a pink again. Okay, so that's a better pink than that one. That one looks a bit muddy. Okay, so I'm going to start off with doing my light pink wash. Okay, so I'm going to take some of that paint with lots of water in it and I'm going to place it down on my painting. Okay, and I'm going to carefully go round those black lines that I've made. I'm trying to not paint over them. I'm trying to paint around them, okay? And now as you can see from Yellena James's work, the work isn't always perfect. The paint isn't always exactly the same on every single item that she's painted. So don't be afraid. Just go in and be brave and just start painting. So that's my first layer of my pink paint done. It has little splodges of darker pink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit more of the concentrated watercolor paint. So what that means is that it's more of the actual paint from the actual tube and it's not got as much water in it. I'm going to take some more of the concentrated pink, which if I paint over here is going to come out darker than the paint that's on here. So as you can see that this colour is darker than this one. And I'm just going to kind of look at where does she have those dark marks. It's mainly down at the bottom. And I'm just going to layer those on top. Okay, and again, like I've said, this technique with watercolour paint is all about layering, okay? It's all about the layering. It's not about going in straight away with dark colour. If you find that sometimes the ink's gone a bit too dark or the paint's gone a bit too dark, you can just add some more water to it. That's the magic of watercolour paint. Now I'm going to go in really into that, almost where I haven't added any water on my palette. I'm going into the bit where I mixed the two colours together. I'm just going to use that and I'm just going to add splodges like this. And as you can see, as it merges in with the water that's already in the painting, it kind of spreads and it makes this like organic shape. And that's what Yellena James's work is all about. It's all about those organic shapes in the artwork. Okay, and what I can do, so I like this shape that's going on over here, but I think just at the bottom I need to water that down a little bit more. So I'm just going in with my paintbrush into the water and I'm just going to kind of blend out, merge out the bottom of that. Now, a beneficial thing to have whilst you're doing watercolour painting, is having some tissue to hand, okay? Because if you ever have that you put too much water onto your painting, you'll get big splodges of water and you can just use the tissue to soak it up, okay? Now at the bottom, right at the bottom of the leaves, there's some orange. So now I've got my orange, like my reddish orange here. So it might look like red on the camera, but in real life it looks more orange. Okay, and I'm going to swap brushes because I want this orange to be very concentrated. So I'm just going in with a really, really thin paintbrush. And I'm going in with the orange. And then I'm just adding it to the bottom. Okay, so over here, what I was talking about, the tissue, I've ended up with a pool of water. So I'm just going to get a little bit of tissue and I'm just going to soak that up. Soak up the water. I think so. So you can see here, I've got my light pink. If we look at the center one, I've got my light pink, I've got splodges of darker pink, and then I've got my orange at the bottom. So that's the watercolor. Now, if you have acrylic paint at home, you can also achieve this same kind of look, but I'm going to show you how to do it using gouache. So I have got my gouache paint here, and I've only got the primary colours, so I will be using my primary colours, and I'm going to use this as a palette because my palette that I have is full of watercolour at the moment. And I'm going to move on to a different section. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to paint, let's have a look. I'm going to paint these leaves that are down here. So I've taken this little bit of paint here from my gouache set. And because my leaves are thin, I'm using, again, my thin paintbrush. But I'm just going to rinse that out totally so that there's no pink residue on there. Because I want a nice clean brush. And remember, if you are painting, make sure you're cleaning out your water regularly, especially when using watercolor paint. So make sure you wash regularly. Okay, so what I'm going to do again is this is kind of the same as acrylic. So if you've got acrylic paint at home, you can water it down by adding water to it, just like how you do with the watercolor. Okay, and these bits here, they don't actually have the black outlines on them. So I'm just really going to start going in with this paint. I'm going to start painting these stalks, kind of look like seaweed. And this is the same principle as watercolour. The less water you add to this paint, the more concentrated or dark that colour will be, and the more water you add to it, the lighter the paint will be. And it's the same principle going from light to dark. Okay, and then I'm going to take some of my yellow, because it's kind of got yellow bleeding into it. I'm going to merge that yellow in with the green. So you can see here I've painted that. Now the only difference is with this one, I've actually gone on in with the darker colour first. So if you compare green to yellow, obviously green is a darker colour than yellow, but because I need to merge and blend my yellow into my green and not the other way around, I'm going in with the green first. Okay, so I'm going in with a little bit of green, which is watered down, and I am starting at the base. Like this, and I'm stopping kind of 3/4 of the way up, because that's what she seems to do on some, and then on others she uses yellow quite a bit going down, and I'm going to go in with the rest with the yellow. And I'm merging that yellow paint into the green. Okay, and let your colours be organic. Okay, so you can see here, a bit of that green has come up to the top of this bit over here, but that's okay. Okay, because that's what her work is all about. It's all about organic colours, organic shapes. It's not about making sure that everything is perfectly concise and perfectly done. Allow yourself to make a mistake, okay? Because you're the artist, and if you make a mistake, you can always say that that was meant to be part of the process, okay? Now just remember about tone. So you see this one that I'm painting here, this one goes underneath this line which I've drawn at the top. What I'm going to do is around where the kind of stalks overlap one another, I'm going to make sure that in that area my green is more dark, okay? So I'm going to make sure that it's darker, because that's how it would be. If something's laying on top of another object, the object underneath will get the shadow, okay? So to show that those two colours, that this one is overlapping the one underneath, I've added that darker kind of green. So that's this side with the painting. And like I said, I'm not going to finish doing all of the painting because otherwise we are going to be here forever.